If you've ever wanted to time travel back to 1886 for a night, to the year when the Statue of Liberty was dedicated in New York Harbor and Coca-Cola was invented, you can, and you only need to drive 3 hours north of Los Angeles. Welcome to the JD Hyde Bed and Breakfast in Visalia, California. This traditional Eastlake Victorian home is an architectural time capsule, lovingly restored with period-accurate details thanks to the current stewards, and is now open to the public to be able to make it their home for the night as a bed and breakfast. But to fully appreciate the importance of this home, we must dive into its history, which, like all historic homes, has its fair share of fascinating facts and local legends. The original owner of the home and namesake was JD Hyde and his wife Mary. Jeremiah was a native of New York who came west with his brother Richard in the 1860s. Both Ivy League educated lawyers, they saw the opportunity for wealth, not in gold prospecting themselves, but in the men who came to make it rich. They opened up a mercantile that sold prospecting equipment, liquor, and supplies. Honestly, if they'd also had an attached brothel, they would have been a one-stop shop. The Santa Cruz area is where Jeremiah and Richard's financial portfolio really skyrocketed. Besides the mercantile, they got into oil holdings, land acquisition, cattle ranching, and soon Jeremiah purchased the Santa Cruz Sentinel, where he made a killing in advertising. In 1878, they yet again followed the money when the railroad started connecting the coastal communities to the Central Valley, and they ended up settling in Visalia, becoming early pioneers of the area and would be instrumental in its growth. Jeremiah would also arrive in town with a brand new wife, a woman named Mary Jane. At just 23 at the time of their marriage in 1877, and Jeremiah a prime 51, you can imagine their marriage had a lot to do with practicality for both of them. Mary came from a well-to-do Napa family, and Jeremiah was a respectable man, and now a very wealthy man. Jeremiah needed a wife and children to continue the legacy. It would prove fruitful, as they would have 2 sons within the first 3 years of their marriage. In Visalia, they would buy massive amounts of real estate, some of that land later becoming the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. Not so shocking, as John Muir was a personal friend. Jeremiah would take on copious amounts of roles in the newly formed city, from registrar of the local land office for the United States Secretary of the Interior to being both a city council member and a member of the school board. He would become an organizing member of the Board of Trade and become a founding member of the Visalia Savings Bank. He would also, along with his brother Richard, establish the first power company in Visalia. In 1885, he decided he needed a house that represented all of that he had accomplished, and by that I mean show off his incredible wealth. A team of builders were said to have worked 24/7 in order to construct the magnificent home made of California redwood. Its foundation is brick, sitting high off the ground, as the Tulare County is famous for flooding, but above that the home is solid redwood. It has 5 porches, large rooms, and sits on nearly an acre of land. It had a carriage house, water tower, large house for the domestic staff, and privies. It was complete with the finest gas and electric lighting, all of which you can still see today. Sadly for Jeremiah, he would only live in the home 13 years before dying of a heart attack in a buggy on a trip in Selma. I'm not saying Mary wasn't sad. She did, in fact, have the funeral for her late husband at the home in the parlor in the traditional style. But the girl never liked Visalia and craved life back in the city. So in 1899, she would sell the home to James Ambrose Hanna and move herself to Berkeley. James was born in New Brunswick, Canada, had learned law at Harvard, and became a very prominent lawyer in Visalia, as well as owned large swaths of ranch land. He also started the Visalia Water Company, which makes sense as he is the one who brought indoor plumbing into the home. They also added oak flooring and converted a room upstairs for their nanny and or live-in maid to their 2 girls, Margaret and Dorothy, who would live in the home until they both married, one moving away to Berkeley and the other staying in Visalia. The Hannas also made significant changes to the garden, adding new plants, trees, and flowers. Judge Hanna, as he was sometimes called, health started failing him in 1925, and while away at a health retreat with his wife Catherine, he passed away. But unlike Jeremiah's wife, Catherine had no intention of leaving her home. She would live there on her own until her death in 1954, despite local stories claiming her daughters were living with her and then one day disappeared after their mother died. It was only Catherine who was listed on the census records for decades, where both her daughters are listed in their own respective homes during the same time. The home was then acquired by the Lee family, antique dealers who did many repairs on the home, and now, after an extensive 2-year restoration, the home is now owned by its 4th family, who have turned it into one of the most exquisite B&Bs I've ever seen. The garden and pool have also been redone, and a fire pit has been added, making this a full destination and not just a beautiful place to sleep. They also have a library, complete with games for guests, and a nightly cocktail hour. So if you're on your way to the national parks or just keen to get away from the city and stay in a home full of beauty and history, I highly recommend the JD Hyde Bed and Breakfast.